Printer's dedication of Hero and Leander. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Martin Geeson. Hero and Leander by Marlowe and George Chapman. Printer's dedication. To the right worshipful Sir Thomas Walsingham, Knight. Sir, we think not ourselves discharged of the duty we owe to our friend when we have brought the breathless body to the earth. For, albeit the eye there taketh his ever farewell of that beloved object, yet the impression of the man that hath been dear unto us, living an afterlife in our memory, there putteth us in mind of farther obsequies due unto the deceased, and namely of the performance of whatsoever we may judge shall make to his living credit, and to the effecting of his determinations prevented by the stroke of death. By these meditations, as by an intellectual will, I suppose myself executor to the unhappily deceased author of this poem, upon whom, knowing that in his lifetime you bestowed many kind favours, entertaining the parts of reckoning and worth which you found in him with good countenance and liberal affection, I cannot but see so far into the will of him dead, that whatsoever issue of his brain should chance to come abroad, that the first breath it should take might be the gentle air of your liking. For since his self had been accustomed thereunto, it would prove more agreeable and thriving to his right children than any other foster countenance whatsoever. At this time, seeing that this unfinished tragedy happens under my hands to be imprinted, of a double duty, the one to yourself, the other to the deceased, I present the same to your most favourable allowance, offering my utmost self now and ever to be ready at your worship's disposing. Edward Blunt. End of Printer's dedication. Recording by Martin Geeson in Haslemere, Surrey. Section 1 of Hero and Leander. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Martin Geeson. Hero and Leander by Marlowe and George Chapman. Section 1. The first Sestiad, Part 1. The argument. Hero's description and her loves, the fane of Venus, where he moves his worthy love-suit, and attains, whose bliss the wrath of fates restrains for Cupid's grace to Mercury, which tale the author doth imply. On Hellespont, guilty of true love's blood, in view and opposite two cities stood, sea borderers, disjoined by Neptune's might, the one Abydos, the other Sestos hight. At Sestos Hero dwelt, Hero the fair, whom young Apollo courted for her hair, and offered as a dower his burning throne, where she should sit for men to gaze upon. The outside of her garments were of lawn, the lining purple silk with gilt stars drawn, her wide sleeves green, and bordered with a grove where Venus in her naked glory strove to please the careless and disdainful eyes of proud Adonis that before her lies. Her kirtle blue, whereon was many a stain, made with the blood of wretched lovers slain. Upon her head she bare a myrtle wreath, from whence her veil reached to the ground beneath. Her veil was artificial flowers and leaves, whose workmanship both man and beast deceives. Many would praise the sweet smell as she passed, when 'twas the odour which her breath forth cast, and there for honey bees have sought in vain, and beat from thence have lighted there again. About her neck hung chains of pebble stone, which, lightened by her neck, like diamonds shone. She ware no gloves, for neither sun nor wind would burn or parch her hands, but to her mind, or warm or cool them, for they took delight to play upon those hands, they were so white. Buskins of shell, all silver'd, used she, and branched with blushing coral to the knee, where sparrows perched, of hollow pearl and gold, such as the world would wonder to behold. Those with sweet water oft her handmaid fills, which as she went would chirrup through the bills. Some say for her the fairest Cupid pined, and looking in her face was strucken blind. But this is true, so like was one the other, as he imagined Hero was his mother. And oftentimes into her bosom flew, about her naked neck his bare arms threw, and laid his childish head upon her breast, and with still panting rock there took his rest. So lovely fair was Hero, Venus none, as nature wept, thinking she was undone, because she took more from her than she left, and of such wondrous beauty her bereft. Therefore in sign her treasure suffered rack, since Hero's time hath half the world been black. Amorous Leander, beautiful and young, whose tragedy divine Musaeus sung, dwelt at Abydos. Since him dwelt there none, for whom succeeding times make greater moan. His dangling tresses, that were never shorn, had they been cut, and unto Colchos borne, would have allured the venturous youth of Greece to hazard more than for the golden fleece. Fair Cynthia wished his arms might be her sphere. Grief makes her pale, because she moves not there. His body was as straight as Circe's wand. Jove might have sipped out nectar from his hand. Even as delicious meat is to the taste, so was his neck in touching, and surpassed the white of Pelops' shoulder. I could tell 'ee how smooth his breast was, and how white his belly! And whose immortal fingers did imprint that heavenly path with many a curious dint that runs along his back, but my rude pen can hardly blazon forth the loves of men, much less of powerful gods. Let it suffice that my slack muse sings of Leander's eyes, those orient cheeks and lips, exceeding his that leapt into the water for a kiss of his own shadow, and despising many, died ere he could enjoy the love of any. Had wild Hippolytus Leander seen, enamoured of his beauty had he been, his presence made the rudest peasant melt, that in the vast uplandish country dwelt. The barbarous Thracian soldier, moved with naught, was moved with him, and for his favour sought. Some swore he was a maid in man's attire, for in his looks were all that men desire. A pleasant smiling cheek, a speaking eye, a brow for love to banquet royally. And such as knew he was a man would say, Leander, thou art made for amorous play, why art thou not in love, and lov'd of all? Though thou be fair, yet be not thine own thrall. The men of wealthy Sestos every year, for his sake whom their goddess held so dear, rose-cheeked Adonis kept a solemn feast. Thither resorted many a wandering guest to meet their loves. Such as had none at all came lovers home from this great festival. For every street, like to a firmament, glistered with breathing stars, who, where they went, frighted the melancholy earth, which deemed eternal heaven to burn, for so it seemed, as if another Phaethon had got the guidance of the sun's rich chariot. But far above the loveliest Hero shined, and stole away the enchanted gazer's mind. For like sea nymphs inveigling harmony, so was her beauty to the standers by. Nor that night wandering pale and watery star, when yawning dragons draw her thirling car from Latmus mount up to the gloomy sky, where crowned with blazing light and majesty she proudly sits, more overrules the flood than she the hearts of those that near her stood. Even as when gaudy nymphs pursue the chase, wretched Ixion's shaggy-footed race, incensed with savage heat, gallop amain from steep pine-bearing mountains to the plain, so ran the people forth to gaze upon her, and all that viewed her were enamoured on her. And as in fury of a dreadful fight, their fellows being slain or put to flight, poor soldiers stand with fear of death, dead strucken, so at her presence, all surprised and tooken, await the sentence of her scornful eyes. He whom she favours lives, the other dies. There might you see one sigh, another rage, and some, their violent passions to assuage, compile sharp satires. But alas, too late! For faithful love will never turn to hate, and many, seeing great princes were denied, pined as they went, and thinking on her, died. On this feast day, O cursed day and hour, went Hero thorough Sestos from her tower to Venus' temple, where unhappily, as after chanced, they did each other spy. So fair a church as this had Venus none, the walls were of discoloured jasper stone, wherein was Proteus carved, and overhead a lovely vine of green sea agate spread, where by one hand light-headed Bacchus hung, and with the other wine from grapes outwrung. Of crystal, shining fair, the pavement was. The town of Sestos called it Venus' glass. There might you see the gods in sundry shapes, committing heady riots, incest, rapes. For know that underneath this radiant floor was Danae's statue in a brazen tower, Jove slyly stealing from his sister's bed, to dally with Idalian Ganymed, and for his love Europa bellowing loud, and tumbling with the rainbow in a cloud, blood-quaffing Mars heaving the iron net which limping Vulcan and his Cyclops set, Love kindling fire to burn such towns as Troy, Sylvanus weeping for the lovely boy that now is turned into a cypress tree, under whose shade the wood gods love to be, and in the midst a silver altar stood. There Hero, sacrificing turtle's blood, veiled to the ground, veiling her eyelids close, and modestly they opened as she rose. Thence flew Love's arrow with the golden head, and thus Leander was enamoured. Stone still he stood, and evermore he gazed, till with the fire that from his countenance blazed, relenting Hero's gentle heart was strook. Such force and virtue hath an amorous look. It lies not in our power to love or hate, for will in us is overruled by fate. When two are stripped, long ere the course begin, we wish that one should lose, the other win. And one especially do we affect of two gold ingots, like in each respect. The reason no man knows. Let it suffice, what we behold is censured by our eyes. Where both deliberate, the love is slight. Who ever loved that loved not at first sight? End of section 1. Recording by Martin Geeson in Haslemere, Surrey. Section 2 of Hero and Leander. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Martin Geeson. Hero and Leander by Christopher.Marlowe and George Chapman. Section 2. The first Sestiad, Part 2. He kneeled, but unto her devoutly prayed. Chaste Hero to herself thus softly said, "Were I the saint he worships, I would hear him." And as she spake those words, came somewhat near him. He started up, she blush'd as one ashamed, wherewith Leander much more was inflamed. He touch'd her hand, in touching it she trembled. Love deeply grounded hardly is dissembled. These lovers parled by the touch of hands. True love is mute, and oft amazed stands. Thus, while dumb signs their yielding hearts entangled, the air with sparks of living fire was spangled, and night, deep drench'd in misty Acheron, heaved up her head, and half the world upon breathed darkness forth. Dark night is Cupid's day, and now begins Leander to display love's holy fire, with words, with sighs and tears, which like sweet music enter'd Hero's ears, and yet at every word she turned aside, and always cut him off as he replied. At last, like to a bold sharp sophister, with cheerful hope thus he accosted her: "Fair creature, let me speak without offence. I would my rude words had the influence to lead my thoughts as thy fair looks do mine. Then shouldst thou be his prisoner who is thine. Be not unkind and fair. Misshapen stuff are of behaviour boisterous and rough. O shun me not, but hear me ere you go. God knows I cannot force love as you do. My words shall be as spotless as my youth, full of simplicity and naked truth. This sacrifice, whose sweet perfume descending from Venus' altar to your footsteps bending, doth testify that you exceed her far, to whom you offer, and whose none you are. Why should you worship her? Her you surpass as much as sparkling diamonds, flaring glass. A diamond set in lead his worth retains. A heavenly nymph, beloved of human swains, receives no blemish, but oft times more grace, which makes me hope, although I am but base, base in respect of thee, divine and pure, dutiful service may thy love procure, and I in duty will excel all other, as thou in beauty dost exceed love's mother. Nor heaven nor thou were made to gaze upon. As heaven preserves all things, so save thou one. A stately builded ship, well rigged and tall, the ocean maketh more majestical. Why vow'st thou then to live in Sestos here, who on love's seas more glorious wouldst appear? Like untuned golden strings all women are, which long time lie untouched, will harshly jar. Vessels of brass, oft handed, brightly shine. What difference betwixt the richest mine and basest mould, but use? For both, not used, are of like worth. Then treasure is abused when misers keep it. Being put to loan, in time it will return us 2 for 1. Rich robes themselves and others do adorn, neither themselves nor others, if not worn. Who builds a palace and rams up the gate shall see it ruinous and desolate. Ah, simple hero, learn thyself to cherish. Lone women, like to empty houses, perish. Less sins the poor rich man that starves himself in heaping up a mass of drossy pelf, than such as you. His golden earth remains, which after his decease some other gains. But this fair gem, sweet in the loss alone, when you fleet hence, can be bequeathed to none. Or if it could, down from the enamelled sky all heaven would come to claim this legacy, and with intestine broils the world destroy, and quite confound nature's sweet harmony. Well, therefore, by the gods decreed it is, we human creatures should enjoy that bliss. 1 is no number. Maids are nothing then, without the sweet society of men. Wilt thou live single still? 1 shalt thou be, though never singling hymen couple thee. Wild savages that drink of running springs think water far excels all earthly things. But they that daily taste neat wine despise it. Virginity, albeit some highly prize it, compared with marriage, had you tried them both, differs as much as wine and water doth. Base bullion for the stamp's sake we allow, even so for men's impression do we hew, by which alone our reverend fathers say, women receive perfection every way. This idol, which you term virginity, is neither essence subject to the eye, no, nor to any one exterior sense, nor hath it any place of residence, nor is't of earth or mould celestial, or capable of any form at all. Of that which hath no being do not boast. Things that are not at all are never lost. Men foolishly do call it virtuous. What virtue is it that is born with us? Much less can honour be ascribed thereto. Honour is purchased by the deeds we do. Believe me, hero, honour is not won until some honourable deed be done. Seek you for chastity, immortal fame, and know that some have wronged Diana's name. Whose name is it, if she be false or not, so she be fair, but some vile tongues will blot? But you are fair, ay me, so wondrous fair, so young, so gentle, and so debonair, as Greece will think, if thus you live alone, some one or other keeps you as his own. Then, hero, hate me not, nor from me fly, to follow swiftly blasting infamy. Perhaps that sacred priesthood makes thee loath. Tell me, to whom madest thou that heedless oath? To Venus, answered she, and as she spake, Forth from those two tralucent cisterns brake a stream of liquid pearl, which down her face made milk-white paths, whereon the gods might trace to Jove's high court. He thus replied: "The rites in which love's beauteous empress most delights are banquets, Doric music, midnight revel, plays, masques, and all that stern age counteth evil. Thee as a holy idiot doth she scorn, for thou, in vowing chastity, hast sworn to rob her name and honour, and thereby committ'st a sin far worse than perjury, even sacrilege against her deity, through regular and formal purity. To expiate which sin, kiss and shake hands. Such sacrifice as this Venus demands." Thereat she smiled, and did deny him so, as put thereby, yet might he hope for mo', which makes him quickly reinforce his speech, and her in humble manner thus beseech: "Though neither gods nor men may thee deserve, yet for her sake, whom you have vowed to serve, abandon fruitless, cold virginity, the gentle queen of love's sole enemy. Then shall you most resemble Venus' nun, when Venus' sweet rites are performed and done. Flint-breasted Pallas joins in single life, but Pallas and your mistress are at strife. Love, Hero, then, and be not tyrannous, but heal the heart that thou hast wounded thus, nor stain thy youthful years with avarice. Fair fools delight to be accounted nice. The richest corn dies if it be not reaped. Beauty alone is lost, too warily kept." These arguments he used, and many more. Wherewith she yielded, that was won before. Hero's looks yielded, but her words made war. Women are won when they begin to jar. Thus, having swallowed Cupid's golden hook, the more she strived, the deeper was she strook. Yet, evilly feigning anger, strove she still, and would be thought to grant against her will. So, having paused a while, at length she said: "Who taught thee rhetoric to deceive a maid? Ay me, such words as these should I abhor, and yet I like them for the orator." With that, Leander stooped to have embraced her, but from his spreading arms away she cast her, and thus bespake him: "Gentle youth, forbear to touch the sacred garments which I wear. Upon a rock, and underneath a hill far from the town, where all is whist and still, save that the sea, playing on yellow sand, sends forth a rattling murmur to the land, whose sound allures the golden Morpheus in silence of the night to visit us, my turret stands, and there, God knows, I play with Venus' swans and sparrows all the day. A dwarfish beldam bears me company, that hops about the chamber where I lie, and spends the night, that might be better spent, in vain discourse and apish merriment. Come thither." As she spake this, her tongue tripped, for unawares "Come thither" from her slipped. And suddenly her former colour changed, and here and there her eyes through anger ranged, and like a planet moving several ways at one self instant, she, poor soul, assays loving, not to love at all, and every part strove to resist the motions of her heart. And hands so pure, so innocent, nay, such as might have made heaven stoop to have a touch, did she uphold to Venus, and again vowed spotless chastity. But all in vain. Cupid beats down her prayers with his wings, her vows about the empty air he flings. All deep enraged, his sinewy bow he bent, and shot a shaft that burning from him went, wherewith she strucken looked so dolefully, as made love sigh to see his tyranny. And as she wept, her tears to pearl he turned, and wound them on his arm, and for her mourned. Then towards the palace of the Destinies, laden with languishment and grief, he flies, and to those stern nymphs humbly made request both might enjoy each other and be blessed. But with a ghastly dreadful countenance, threatening 1,000 deaths at every glance, they answered love, nor would vouchsafe so much as one poor word, their hate to him was such. Hearken a while, and I will tell you why. End of section 2. Recording by Martin Geeson in Haslemere, Surrey. Section 3 of Hero and Leander. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Martin Geeson. Hero and Leander by Christopher Marlowe and George Chapman. Section 3. First Sestiad, Part 3. Heaven's winged herald, Jove-born Mercury, the self-same day that he asleep had laid enchanted Argus, spied a country maid, whose careless hair, instead of pearl to adorn it, glistered with dew, as one that seemed to scorn it. Her breath as fragrant as the morning rose, her mind pure, and her tongue untaught to glose. Yet proud she was, for lofty pride that dwells in towered courts is oft in shepherds' cells, and too well the fair vermilion knew and silver tincture of her cheeks, that drew the love of every swain. On her this god enamoured was, and with his snaky rod did charm her nimble feet, and made her stay. The while upon a hillock down he lay, and sweetly on his pipe began to play, and with smooth speech her fancy to assay, till in his twining arms he locked her fast, and then he wooed with kisses. And at last, as shepherds do, her on the ground he laid, and tumbling in the grass, he often strayed beyond the bounds of shame, in being bold to eye those parts which no eye should behold, and like an insolent commanding lover, boasting his parentage, would needs discover the way to new Elysium. But she, whose only dower was her chastity, having striven in vain, was now about to cry, and crave the help of shepherds that were nigh. Herewith he stayed his fury, and began to give her leave to rise. Away she ran. After went Mercury, who used such cunning, as she, to hear his tale, left off her running. Maids are not won by brutish force and might, but speeches full of pleasure and delight. And knowing Hermes courted her, was glad that she such loveliness and beauty had as could provoke his liking. Yet was mute, and neither would deny nor grant his suit. Still vowed he love. She, wanting no excuse to feed him with delays, as women use, or thirsting after immortality. All women are ambitious naturally. Imposed upon her lover such a task as he ought not perform, nor yet she ask. A draught of flowing nectar she requested, wherewith the king of gods and men is feasted. He, ready to accomplish what she willed, stole some from Hebe. Hebe Jove's cup filled, and gave it to his simple rustic love, which being known, as what is hid from Jove, he inly stormed, and waxed more furious than for the fire filched by Prometheus, and thrusts him down from heaven. He, wandering here, in mournful terms, with sad and heavy cheer, complained to Cupid. Cupid, for his sake, to be revenged on Jove did undertake, and those on whom heaven, earth, and hell relies, I mean the adamantine destinies, he wounds with love, and forced them equally to dote upon deceitful Mercury. They offered him the deadly fatal knife that shears the slender threads of human life. At his fair feathered feet the engines laid, which the earth from ugly chaos den upweighed. These he regarded not, but did entreat that Jove, usurper of his father's seat, might presently be banished into hell, and aged Saturn in Olympus dwell. They granted what he craved, and once again Saturn and Ops began their golden reign. Murder, rape, war and lust, and treachery, wherewith Jove closed in Stygian empery. But long this blessed time continued not. As soon as he his wished purpose got, he, reckless of his promise, did despise the love of the everlasting destinies. They, seeing it, both love and him abhorred, and Jupiter unto his place restored. and but that learning, in despite of fate, will mount aloft, and enter heaven gate, and to the seat of Jove itself advance, Hermes had slept in hell with ignorance. Yet, as a punishment, they added this, that he and poverty should always kiss. And to this day is every scholar poor. Gross gold from them runs headlong to the boor. Likewise the angry sisters, thus deluded, to venge themselves on Hermes, have concluded that Midas' brood shall sit in honour's chair, to which the Muses' sons are only heir. And fruitful wits that in aspiring are, shall discontent run into regions far. And few great lords in virtuous deeds shall joy, but be surprised with every garish toy, and still enrich the lofty servile clown, who with encroaching guile keeps learning down. Then muse not Cupid's suit no better sped, seeing in their loves the fates were injured. End of section 3. Recording by Martin Geeson in Haslemere, Surrey. Section 4 of Hero and Leander. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Martin Geeson. Hero and Leander by Christopher Marlowe and George Chapman. Section 4. The second Sestiad, Part 1. The argument. Hero of love takes deeper sense, and doth her love more recompense. Their first night's meeting, where sweet kisses are the only crowns of both their blisses. He swims to Abydos and returns. Cold Neptune with his beauty burns, whose suit he shuns, and doth aspire Hero's fair tower and his desire. By this sad Hero, with love unacquainted, viewing Leander's face, fell down and fainted. He kissed her, and breathed life into her lips, wherewith, as one displeased, away she trips. Yet as she went, full often looked behind, and many poor excuses did she find to linger by the way, and once she stayed, and would have turned again, but was afraid, in offering parley, to be counted light. So on she goes, and in her idle flight her painted fan of curled plumes let fall, thinking to train Leander therewithal. He, being a novice, knew not what she meant, but stayed, and after her a letter sent, which joyful Hero answered in such sort as he had hoped to scale the beauteous fort wherein the liberal Graces locked their wealth, and therefore to her tower he got by stealth. Wide open stood the door, he need not climb, and she herself before the pointed time had spread the board, with roses strewed the room, and oft looked out, and mused he did not come. At last he came. Oh, who can tell the greeting these greedy lovers had at their first meeting? He asked, she gave, and nothing was denied. Both to each other quickly were affied. Look how their hands, so were their hearts united, and what he did, she willingly requited. Sweet are the kisses, the embracements sweet, when like desires and like affections meet. For from the earth to heaven is Cupid raised, where fancy is in equal balance paised. Yet she this rashness suddenly repented, and turned aside, and to herself lamented, as if her name and honour had been wronged, by being possessed of him for whom she longed. Ay, and she wished, albeit not from her heart, that he would leave her turret and depart. The mirthful god of amorous pleasure smiled to see how he this captive nymph beguiled. For hitherto he did but fan the fire, and kept it down, that it might mount the higher. Now waxed she jealous, lest his love abated, fearing her own thoughts made her to be hated. Therefore unto him hastily she goes, and like light Salmacis her body throws upon his bosom, where with yielding eyes she offers up herself a sacrifice to slake his anger, if he were displeased. Oh, what god would not therewith be appeased? Like Aesop's cock, this jewel he enjoyed, and as a brother with his sister toyed, supposing nothing else was to be done, now he her favour and goodwill had won. But know you not that creatures wanting sense by nature have a mutual appetence, and wanting organs to advance a step, moved by love's force unto each other lep? Much more in subjects having intellect, some hidden influence breeds like effect. Albeit Leander, rude in love and raw, long dallying with Hero, nothing saw that might delight him more, yet he suspected some amorous rights or other were neglected. Therefore unto his body hers he clung. She, fearing on the rushes to be flung, strived with redoubled strength. The more she strived, the more a gentle pleasing heat revived, which taught him all that elder lovers know. And now the same 'gan so to scorch and glow, as in plain terms, yet cunningly, he crave it. Love always makes those eloquent that have it. She, with a kind of granting, put him by it, and ever as he thought himself most nigh it, like to the tree of Tantalus, she fled, and seeming lavish, saved her maidenhead. Ne'er king more sought to keep his diadem than Hero this inestimable gem. Above our life we love a steadfast friend, yet when a token of great worth we send, we often kiss it, often look thereon, and stay the messenger that would be gone. No marvel then, though Hero would not yield so soon to part from that she dearly held. Jewels being lost are found again, this never. 'Tis lost but once, and once lost, lost for ever. Now had the Morn espied her lover's steeds, whereat she starts, puts on her purple weeds, and red for anger that he stayed so long, all headlong throws herself the clouds among. And now Leander, fearing to be missed, embraced her suddenly, took leave and kissed. Long was he taking leave, and loath to go, and kissed again, as lovers use to do. Sad Hero wrung him by the hand, and wept, saying, "Let your vows and promises be kept." Then standing at the door, she turned about, as loath to see Leander going out. And now the sun that through the horizon peeps, as pitying these lovers, downward creeps, so that in silence of the cloudy night, though it was morning, did he take his flight. But what the secret trusty night concealed, Leander's amorous habit soon revealed. With Cupid's myrtle was his bonnet crowned, about his arms the purple riband wound, wherewith she wreathed her largely spreading hair. Nor could the youth abstain, but he must wear the sacred ring wherewith she was endowed, when first religious chastity she vowed, which made his love through Sestos to be known, and thence unto Abydos sooner blown than he could sail. For incorporeal fame, whose weight consists in nothing but her name, is swifter than the wind, whose tardy plumes are reeking water and dull earthly fumes. Home when he came, he seemed not to be there, but like exiled air thrust from his sphere, set in a foreign place, and straight from thence, Alcides like, by mighty violence he would have chased away the swelling main that him from her unjustly did detain. Like as the sun in a diameter fires and inflames objects removed far, and heateth kindly, shining laterally, so beauty sweetly quickens when 'tis nigh, but being separated and removed, burns where it cherished, murders where it loved. Therefore, even as an index to a book, so to his mind was young Leander's look. Oh, none but gods have power their love to hide. Affection by the countenance is descried. The light of hidden fire itself discovers, and love that is concealed betrays poor lovers. His secret flame apparently was seen. Leander's father knew where he had been, and for the same mildly rebuked his son, thinking to quench the sparkles new begun. But love resisted once grows passionate, and nothing more than counsel lovers hate. For as a hot proud horse highly disdains to have his head controlled, but breaks the reins, spits forth the ringled bit, and with his hoofs checks the submissive ground, so he that loves, the more he is restrained, the worse he fares. What is it now but mad Leander dares? "O Hero, Hero," thus he cried full oft, and then he got him to a rock aloft, where having spied her tower, long stared he on't, and prayed the narrow toiling Hellespont to part in twain, that he might come and go. But still the rising billows answered, "No." With that he stripped him to the ivory skin, and crying, "Love, I come," leaped lively in. Whereat the sapphire-visaged god grew proud, and made his capering Triton sound aloud, imagining that Ganymede, displeased, had left the heavens. Therefore on him he seized. Leander strived, the waves about him wound, and pulled him to the bottom, where the ground was strewed with pearl, and in low coral groves sweet-singing mermaids sported with their loves on heaps of heavy gold, and took great pleasure to spurn in careless sort the shipwreck treasure. For here the stately azure palace stood, where kingly Neptune and his train abode. The lusty god embraced him, called him love, and swore he never should return to Jove. But when he knew it was not Ganymede, for under water he was almost dead, he heaved him up, and looking on his face, beat down the bold waves with his triple mace, which mounted up, intending to have kissed him, and fell in drops like tears because they missed him. Leander, being up, began to swim, and looking back, saw Neptune follow him. Whereat, aghast, the poor soul gan to cry, "O let me visit Hero ere I die." The god put Heli's bracelet on his arm, and swore the sea should never do him harm. He clapped his plump cheeks, with his tresses played, and smiling wantonly his love bewrayed. He watched his arms, and as they opened wide at every stroke, betwixt them he would slide, and steal a kiss, and then run out and dance, and as he turned, cast many a lustful glance, and throw him gaudy toys to please his eye, and dive into the water, and there pry upon his breast, his thighs, and every limb, and up again, and close beside him swim, and talk of love. Leander made reply, "You are deceived. I am no woman, I." End of section 4. Recording by Martin Geeson in Haslemere, Surrey. Section 5 of Hero and Leander. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Martin Geeson. Hero and Leander by Christopher Marlowe and George Chapman. Section 5. The second Sestiad, Part 2. Thereat smiled Neptune, and then told a tale, how that a shepherd, sitting in a vale, played with a boy so lovely, fair, and kind, as for his love both earth and heaven pined, that of the cooling river durst not drink, lest water nymphs should pull him from the brink. And when he sported in the fragrant lawns, goat-footed satyrs and upstaring fawns would steal him thence. Ere half his tale was done, "Ay me," Leander cried, "the enamoured sun, that now should shine on Thetis' glassy bower, descends upon my radiant hero's tower. Oh, that these tardy arms of mine were wings!" And as he spake, upon the waves he springs. Neptune was angry that he gave no ear, and in his heart revenging malice bare. He flung at him his mace, but as it went, he called it in, for love made him repent. The mace returning back, his own hand hit, as meaning to be venged for darting it. When this fresh bleeding wound Leander view'd, his colour went and came, as if he rued the grief which Neptune felt. In gentle breasts relenting thoughts, remorse, and pity rests. And who have hard hearts and obdurate minds, but vicious, hair-brained, and illiterate hinds? The god, seeing him with pity to be moved, thereon concluded that he was beloved. Love is too full of faith, too credulous, with folly and false hope deluding us. Wherefore, Leander's fancy to surprise, to the rich ocean for gifts he flies. 'Tis wisdom to give much, a guilt prevails when deep persuading oratory fails. By this, Leander being near the land, cast down his weary feet, and felt the sand. Breathless albeit he were, he rested not till to the solitary tower he got, and knocked and called, at which celestial noise the longing heart of Hero much more joys than nymphs and shepherds when the timbrel rings, or crooked dolphin when the sailor sings. She stayed not for her robes, but straight arose, and drunk with gladness to the door she goes, where seeing a naked man, she screeched for fear. Such sights as this to tender maids are rare, and ran into the dark herself to hide. Rich jewels in the dark are soonest spied. Unto her he was led, or rather drawn by those white limbs which sparkled through the lawn. The nearer that he came, the more she fled, and seeking refuge, slipped into her bed. Whereon Leander sitting, thus began, through numbing cold, all feeble, faint, and wan. If not for love, yet love for pity's sake, me in thy bed and maiden bosom take. At least vouchsafe these arms some little room, who hoping to embrace thee, cheerly swoon. this head was beat with many a churlish billow, and therefore let it rest upon thy pillow. Herewith affrighted, Hero shrunk away, and in her lukewarm place Leander lay, whose lively heat, like fire from heaven fet, would animate gross clay, and higher set the drooping thoughts of base declining souls, than dreary Mars carousing nectar bowls. His hands he cast upon her like a snare, she, overcome with shame and sallow fear, like chaste Diana when Actaeon spied her, being suddenly betrayed, dived down to hide her. And as her silver body downward went, with both her hands she made the bed a tent, and in her own mind thought herself secure, or cast with dim and darksome coverture. And now she lets him whisper in her ear, flatter, entreat, promise, protest, and swear, yet ever as he greedily assayed to touch those dainties, she the harpy played, and every limb did, as a soldier stout, defend the fort, and keep the foeman out. For though the rising ivory mount he scaled, which is with azure circling lines empaled, much like a globe may I term this by which love sails to regions full of bliss. Yet there with Sisyphus he toiled in vain, till gentle parley did the truce obtain. Even as a bird which in our hands we wring forth plungeth, and oft flutters with her wing, she trembling strove. This strife of hers, like that which made the world, another world begat of unknown joy. Treason was in her thought, and cunningly to yield herself she sought. Seeming not won, yet won she was at length. In such wars women use but half their strength. Leander now, like Theban Hercules, entered the orchard of the Hesperides, whose fruit none rightly can describe, but he that pulls or shakes it from the golden tree. Wherein Leander on her quivering breast breathless spoke something, and sighed out the rest, which so prevailed, as he with small ado enclosed her in his arms, and kissed her too, and every kiss to her was as a charm, and to Leander as a fresh alarm, so that the truce was broke, and she, alas, poor silly maiden, at his mercy was. Love is not full of pity, as men say, but deaf and cruel where he means to prey. And now she wished this night were never done, and sighed to think upon the approaching sun, for much it grieved her that the bright daylight should know the pleasure of this blessed night, and them, like Mars and Erycine, display both in each other's arms, chained as they lay. Again, she knew not how to frame her look, or speak to him, who in a moment took that which so long, so charily she kept, and fain by stealth away she would have crept, and to some corner secretly have gone, leaving Leander in the bed alone. But as her naked feet were whipping out, he on the sudden cling'd her so about, that mermaid-like unto the floor she slid. One half appear'd, the other half was hid. Thus near the bed she, blushing, stood upright, and from her countenance behold ye might a kind of twilight break, which through the air, as from an orient cloud, glimpsed here and there, and round about the chamber this false morn brought forth the day, before the day was born. So Hero's ruddy cheek Hero betrayed, and her all naked to his sight displayed, whence his admiring eyes more pleasure took than Dis on heaps of gold fixing his look. By this Apollo's golden harp began to sound forth music to the Ocean, which watchful Hesperus no sooner heard, but he the bright day-bearing car prepared, and ran before as harbinger of light, and with his flaring beams mocked ugly night, till she, o'ercome with anguish, shame, and rage, dang'd down to hell her loathsome carriage. Here Marlowe's work ends. The rest of the poem is by Chapman. End of section 5. Recording by Martin Geeson in Haslemere, Surrey. Section 6 of Hero and Leander. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Martin Geeson. Hero and Leander by Christopher Marlowe and George Chapman. Section 6. The third Sestiad by George Chapman. The argument. Leander to the envious light resigns his night sports with the night, and swims the Hellespont again. Thesme, the deity sovereign of customs and religious rites, appears reproving his delights, since nuptial honours he neglected, which straight he vows shall be effected. Fair Hero, left de-virginate, weighs, and with fury wails her state, but with her love and woman's wit she argues, and approveth it. New light gives new directions, fortunes new to fashion our endeavours that ensue. More harsh, at least more hard, more grave and high our subject runs, and our stern muse must fly. Love's edge is taken off, and that light flame, those thoughts, joys, longings that before became high unexperienced blood, and made sharp plights, must now grow staid, and censure the delights that being enjoyed ask judgment. Now we praise as having parted, evenings crown the days. And now, ye wanton loves and young desires, pied vanity, the mint of strange attires, ye lisping flatteries and obsequious glances, relentful musics and attractive dances, and you detested charms constraining love, shun love's stolen sports, by that these lovers prove. By this the sovereign of heaven's golden fires, and young Leander, lord of his desires, together from their lovers' arms arose. Leander into Hellespontus throws his hero-handled body, whose delight made him disdain each other epithet. And so amidst the enamoured waves he swims, the god of gold, of purpose gilt his limbs, that this word gilt, including double sense, the double guilt of his incontinence might be expressed, that had no stay to employ the treasure which the love god let him joy in his dear hero with such sacred thrift, as had beseemed so sanctified a gift; but like a greedy vulgar prodigal, would on the stock dispend, and rudely fall before his time, to that unblessed blessing, which for lust's plague doth perish with possessing. Joy graven in sense, like snow in water, wastes, without preserve of virtue nothing lasts. What man is he that with a wealthy eye enjoys a beauty richer than the sky, through whose white skin, softer than soundest sleep, with damask eyes the ruby blood doth peep, and runs in branches through her azure veins, whose mixture and first fire his love attains, whose both hands limit both love's deities, and sweeten human thoughts like paradise, whose disposition silken is and kind, directed with an earth-exempted mind, who thinks not heaven with such a love is given, and who, like earth, would spend that dower of heaven with rank desire to joy it all at first. What simply kills our hunger quencheth thirst, clothes but our nakedness, and makes us live. Praise does not any of her favours give, but what doth plentifully minister beauteous apparel and delicious cheer, so ordered that it still excites desire, and still gives pleasure freeness to aspire, the palm of bounty ever moist preserving. To love's sweet life this is the courtly carving. Thus time, and all states ordering ceremony, had banished all offence. Time's golden thigh upholds the flowery body of the earth in sacred harmony, and every birth of men and actions makes legitimate. Being used aright, the use of time is fate. Yet did the gentle flood transfer once more this prize of love home to his father's shore, where he unlades himself of that false wealth that makes few rich, treasures composed by stealth, and to his sister, kind Hermione, who on the shore kneeled, praying to the sea for his return, he all love's goods did show, in Hero seized for him, in him for Hero. His most kind sister all his secrets knew, and to her singing like a shower he flew, sprinkling the earth, that to their tombs took in streams dead for love, to leave his ivory skin, which yet a snowy foam did leave above, as soul to the dead water that did love. And from thence did the first white roses spring, for love is sweet and fair in everything. And all the sweetened shore, as he did go, was crowned with odorous roses, white as snow. Love-blessed Leander was with love so filled, that love to all that touched him he instilled. And as the colours of all things we see to our sight's powers communicated be, so to all objects that in compass came of any sense he had, his senses' flame flowed from his parts with force so virtual, it fired with sense things mere insensual. Now with warm baths and odours comforted, when he lay down, he kindly kissed his bed, as consecrating it to Hero's right, and vowed thereafter that whatever sight put him in mind of Hero or her bliss should be her altar to prefer a kiss. Then laid he forth his late enriched arms, in whose white circle love writ all his charms, and made his characters sweet Hero's limbs. When on his breast's warm sea she sidling swims, and as those arms, held up in circle, met, he said, "See, sister, Hero's carcanet, which she had rather wear about her neck than all the jewels that do Juno deck." But as he shook with passionate desire to put in flame his other secret fire, a music so divine did pierce his ear, as never yet his ravished sense did hear, when suddenly a light of 20 hues brake through the roof, and like the rainbow views amazed Leander, in whose beams came down the goddess Ceremony, with a crown of all the stars, and heaven with her descended. Her flaming hair to her bright feet extended, by which hung all the bench of deities, and in a chain, compact of ears and eyes, she led religion. All her body was clear and transparent as the purest glass, for she was all presented to the sense. Devotion, order, state, and reverence her shadows were, society, memory, all which her sight made live, her absence die. A rich disparent pentacle she wears, drawn full of circles and strange characters. Her face was changeable to every eye, one way looked ill, another graciously, which while men viewed, they cheerful were and holy, but looking off, vicious and melancholy. The snaky paths to each observed law did policy in her broad bosom draw. One hand a mathematic crystal sways, which, gathering in one line 1,000 rays from her bright eyes, confusion burns to death, and all estates of men distinguisheth. By it morality and comeliness themselves in all their sightly figures dress. Her other hand a laurel rod applies to beat back barbarism and avarice, that followed, eating earth and excrement and human limbs, and would make proud ascent to seats of gods, where ceremony slain. The hours and graces bore her glorious train, and all the sweets of our society were sphered and treasured in her bounteous eye. Thus she appeared, and sharply did reprove Leander's bluntness in his violent love, told him how poor was substance without rights, like bills unsigned, desires without delights, like meats unseasoned, like rank corn that grows on cottages, that none or reaps or sows, not being with civil forms confirmed and bounded, for human dignities and comforts founded, but loose and secret all their glories hide. Fear fills the chamber, darkness decks the bride. She vanished, leaving pierced Leander's heart with sense of his unceremonious part, in which, with plain neglect of nuptial rites, he close and flatly fell to his delights, and instantly he vowed to celebrate all rites pertaining to his married state. So up he gets, and to his father goes, to whose glad ears he doth his vows disclose. The nuptials are resolved with utmost power, and he at night would swim to Hero's tower, from whence he meant to Sestos' forked bay to bring her covertly, where ships must stay, sent by his father, throughly rigged and manned, to waft her safely to Abydos' strand. There leave we him, and with fresh wing pursue astonished Hero, whose most wished view I thus long have forborne, because I left her so out of countenance, and her spirits bereft her. To look on one abashed is impudence, when of slight faults he hath too deep a sense. Her blushing het her chamber, she looked out, and all the air she purpled round about. And after it a foul black day befell, which ever since a red morn doth foretell, and still renews our woes for Hero's woe. And foul it proved, because it figured so the next night's horror, which prepare to hear. I fail if it profane your daintiest ear. Then ho! most strangely intellectual fire, that proper to my soul hast power to inspire her burning faculties, and with the wings of thy unsphered flame visit'st the springs of spirits immortal. Now, as swift as time doth follow motion, find the eternal clime of his free soul, whose living subject stood up to the chin in the Pierian flood, and drunk to me half this Musaean story, inscribing it to deathless memory. Confer with it, and make my pledge as deep, that neither's draught be consecrate to sleep, tell it how much his late desires I tender, if yet it know not, and to light surrender my soul's dark offspring, willing it should die to loves, to passions, and society. End of section 6. Recording by Martin Geeson in Haslemere, Surrey. Section 7 of Hero and Leander. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Martin Geeson. Hero and Leander by Christopher Marlowe and George Chapman. Section 7. The third Sestiad, Part 2. Sweet Hero, left upon her bed alone, her maidenhead, her vows, Leander gone, and nothing with her but a violent crew of new-come thoughts, that yet she never knew, even to herself a stranger, was much like the Iberian city that war's hand did strike by English force in princely Essex guide, when peace assured her towers had fortified, and golden-fingered India had bestowed such wealth on her, that strength and empire flowed into her turrets, and her virgin waist the wealthy girdle of the sea embraced, till our Leander, that made Mars his Cupid, for soft love suits with iron thunders chid, swum to her town, dissolved her virgin zone, led in his power, and made confusion run through her streets amazed, that she supposed she had not been in her own walls enclosed, but rapt by wonder to some foreign state, seeing all her issue so disconsolate, and all her peaceful mansions possessed with war's just spoil, and many a foreign guest from every corner driving an enjoyer, supplying it with power of a destroyer. So fared fair Hero in the expugned fort of her chaste bosom, and of every sort strange thoughts possessed her, ransacking her breast for that was not there, her wonted rest. She was a mother straight, and bore with pain thoughts that spake straight, and wished their mother slain. She hates their lives, and they their own and hers. Such strife still grows where sin the race prefers. Love is a golden bubble, full of dreams, that waking breaks, and fills us with extremes. She mused how she could look upon her sire, and not show that without that was entire. For as a glass is an inanimate eye, and outward forms embraceth inwardly, so is the eye an animate glass, that shows in forms without us. And as Phoebus throws his beams abroad, though he in clouds be closed, still glancing by them till he find opposed a loose and roared vapour that is fit to vent his searching beams, and useth it to form a tender 20-coloured eye, cast in a circle round about the sky, So when our fiery soul, our body's star, that ever is in motion circular, conceives a form, in seeking to display it through all our cloudy parts, it doth convey it forth at the eye, as the most pregnant place, and that reflects it round about the face. And this event, uncourtly Hero thought, her inward guilt would in her looks have wrought. For yet the world's stale cunning she resisted, to bear foul thoughts, yet forge what looks she listed, and held it for a very silly sleight to make a perfect metal counterfeit. Glad to disclaim herself, proud of an art that makes the face a pander to the heart. Those be the painted moons whose lights profane beauty's true heaven, at full still in their wane. Those be the lapwing faces that still cry, "Here 'tis," when that they vow is nothing nigh. Base fools! when every Moorish fool can teach that which men think the height of human reach. But custom, that the apoplexy is of bed-rid nature, and lives led amiss, and takes away all feeling of offence, yet brazed not Hero's brow with impudence. And this she thought most hard to bring to pass, to seem in countenance other than she was, as if she had two souls, one for the face, one for the heart, and that they shifted place as either list to utter or conceal what they conceived, or as one soul did deal with both affairs at once, keeps and ejects both at an instant contrary effects, retention and ejection in her powers being acts alike, for this one vice of ours, that forms the thought and sways the countenance, rules both our motion and our utterance. These and more grave conceits toiled Hero's spirits. For though the light of her discoursive wits perhaps might find some little hole to pass through all these worldly cinctures, yet, alas, there was a heavenly flame encompassed her, her goddess, in whose fane she did prefer her virgin vows, from whose impulsive sight she knew the black shield of the darkest night could not defend her, nor wit's subtlest art. This was the point pierced Hero to the heart, who, heavy to the death, with a deep sigh, and hand that languished, took a robe was nigh, exceeding large, and of black cypress made, in which she sate, hid from the day in shade. Even over head and face, down to her feet, her left hand made it at her bosom meet, her right hand leaned on her heart-bowing knee, wrapped in unshapeful folds, 'twas death to see. Her knee stayed that, and that her falling face, each limb helped other to put on disgrace. No form was seen where form held all her sight, but like an embryon that saw never light, or like a scorched statue made a coal with 3 winged lightning, or a wretched soul muffled with endless darkness she did sit. The night had never such a heavy spirit. Yet might a penetrating eye well see how fast her clear tears melted on her knee through her black veil, and turned as black as it, mourning to be her tears. Then wrought her wit with her broke vow, her goddess wrath, her fame, all tools that enginous despair could frame, which made her strew the floor with her torn hair, and spread her mantle piecemeal in the air. Like Jove's son's club, strong passion struck her down, and with a piteous shriek enforced her swoon. Her shriek made with another shriek ascend the frighted matron that on her did tend, and as with her own cry her sense was slain, so with the other it was called again. She rose, and to her bed made forced way, and laid her down even where Leander lay. And all this while the red sea of her blood ebbed with Leander, but now turned the flood, and all her fleet of spirits came swelling in, with child of sail, and did hot fight begin with those severe conceits she too much marked. And here Leander's beauties were embarked. He came in swimming, painted all with joys, such as might sweeten hell. His thought destroys all her destroying thoughts. She thought she felt his heart in hers, with her contentions melt, and chide her soul that it could so much err, to check the true joys he deserved in her. Her fresh heat blood cast figures in her eyes, and she supposed she saw in Neptune's skies how her star wandered, washed in smarting brine, for her love's sake, that with immortal wine should be embathed, and swim in more heart's ease than there was water in the Sestian seas. Then said her Cupid-prompted spirit, "Shall I sing moans to such delightsome harmony? Shall slick-tongued Fame, patched up with voices rude, the drunken bastard of the multitude, begot when Father Judgment is away, and gossip-like says because others say, takes news as if it were too hot to eat, and spits it slavering forth for dog-fees meat, make me, for forging a fantastic vow, presume to bear what makes grave matrons bow? Good vows are never broken with good deeds, for then good deeds were bad. Vows are but seeds, and good deeds fruits, even those good deeds that grow from other stocks than from the observed vow. That is a good deed that prevents a bad. Had I not yielded, slain myself I had. Hero Leander is, Leander hero. Such virtue love hath to make one of two. If then Leander did my maidenhead get, Leander being myself, I still retain it. We break chaste vows when we live loosely ever, but bound as we are, we live loosely never. Two constant lovers being joined in one, yielding to one another, yield to none. We know not how to vow till love unblind us, and vows made ignorantly never bind us. Too true it is, that when 'tis gone, men hate the joys as vain they took in love's estate. But that since they have lost, the heavenly light should show them way to judge of all things right. When life is gone, death must implant his terror. As death is foe to life, so love to error. Before we love, how range we through this sphere, searching the sundry fancies hunted here? Now with desire of wealth transported quite beyond our free humanity's delight. Now with ambition climbing falling towers, whose hope to scale our fear to fall devours. Now rapt with pastimes, pomp, all joys impure, in things without us no delight is sure. But love, with all joys crowned, within doth sit. O goddess, pity love, and pardon it. Thus spake she weeping, but her goddess ear burned with too stern a heat, and would not hear. Ay me! Hath heaven's straight fingers no more graces for such as Hero than for homeliest faces? Yet she hoped well, and in her sweet conceit weighing her arguments, she thought them weight, and that the logic of Leander's beauty, and them together, would bring proofs of duty. And if her soul, that was a skilful glance of heaven's great essence, found such imperence in her love's beauties, she had confidence Jove loved him too, and pardoned her offence. Beauty in heaven and earth this grace doth win, it supples rigour, and it lessens sin. Thus her sharp wit, her love, her secrecy, trooping together, made her wonder why she should not leave her bed, and to the temple. Her health said she must live, her sex dissemble. She viewed Leander's place, and wished he were turned to his place, so his place were Leander. Ay me, said she, that love's sweet life and sense should do it harm. My love had not gone hence, had he been like his place. O blessed place, image of constancy! Thus my love's grace parts nowhere, but it leaves something behind worth observation. He renowns his kind. His motion is like heaven's, orbicular, for where he once is, he is ever there. This place was mine, Leander, now 'tis thine. Thou being myself, then it is double mine, mine and Leander's mine, Leander's mine. O see what wealth it yields me, nay, yields him. For I am in it, he for me doth swim. Rich fruitful love, that doubling self-estates, elixir like contracts though separates. Dear place, I kiss thee, and do welcome thee, as from Leander ever sent to me. End of section 7. Recording by Martin Geeson in Haslemere, Surrey. Section 8 of Hero and Leander. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Martin Geeson. Hero and Leander by Marlowe and George Chapman. Section 8. The fourth Sestiad. The argument. Hero, in sacred habit decked, doth private sacrifice effect. Her scarf's description, wrought by fate, ostents that threaten her estate, the strange yet physical events Leander's counterfeit presents. In thunder Cyprides descends, presaging both the lovers' ends. Ecte, the goddess of remorse, with vocal and articulate force inspires Leucote, Venus' swan, t'excuse the beauteous Sestian. Venus, to wreak her rights' abuses, creates the monster Eronusis, inflaming Hero's sacrifice with lightning darted from her eyes. And thereof springs the painted beast that ever since taints every breast. Now from Leander's place she rose, and found her hair and rent robe scattered on the ground, which taking up, she every piece did lay upon an altar, where in youth of day she used t'exhibit private sacrifice. These she would offer to the deities of her fair goddess and her powerful son, as relics of her late felt passion. And in that holy sort she vowed to end them, in hope her violent fancies that did rend them would as quite fade in her love's holy fire, as they should in the flames she meant to inspire. Then she put on all her religious weeds, that decked her in her secret sacred deeds. A crown of icicles, that sun nor fire could ever melt, and figured chaste desire. A golden star shined in her naked breast, in honour of the queen light of the East. In her right hand she held a silver wand, on whose bright top Peristera did stand, who was a nymph, but now transformed a dove, and in her life was dear in Venus' love. And for her sake she ever since that time choosed doves to draw her coach through heaven's blue clime. Her plenteous hair in curled billows swims on her bright shoulder, her harmonious limbs sustained no more but a most subtle veil that hung on them, as it durst not assail their different concord. For the weakest air could raise it swelling from her beauties fair. Nor did it cover, but adumbrate only her most heart-piercing parts, that a blest eye might see, as it did shadow, fearfully, all that all love deserving paradise. It was as blue as the most freezing skies, near the sea's hue, for thence her goddess came. On it a scarf she wore of wondrous frame, in midst whereof she wrought a virgin's face, from whose each cheek a fiery blush did chase two crimson flames, that did two ways extend, spreading the ample scarf to either end, which figured the division of her mind, whiles yet she rested bashfully inclined, and stood not resolute to wed Leander. This served her white neck for a purple sphere, and cast itself at full breadth down her back. There, since the first breath that begun the rack of her free quiet from Leander's lips, she wrought a sea in one flame, full of ships, but that one ship where all her wealth did pass, like simple merchants' goods, Leander was. For in that sea she naked figured him. Her diving needle taught him how to swim, and to each thread did such resemblance give, for joy to be so like him it did live. Things senseless live by art, and rational die by rude contempt of art and industry. Scarce could she work, but in her strength of thought she feared she pricked Leander as she wrought, and oft would shriek so, that her guardian frighted would, staring, haste, as with some mischief sighted. They double life that dead things grief sustain, they kill that feel not their friends' living pain. Sometimes she feared he sought her infamy, and then, as she was working of his eye, she thought to prick it out to quench her ill. But as she pricked, it grew more perfect still. Trifling attempts no serious acts advance, the fire of love is blown by dalliance. In working his fair neck, she so did grace it, she still was working her own arms to embrace it. That and his shoulders and his hands were seen above the stream, and with a pure sea green she did so quaintly shadow every limb, all might be seen beneath the waves to swim. In this conceited scarf she wrought beside a moon in change, and shooting stars did glide in number after her with bloody beams, which figured her affects in their extremes, pursuing nature in her Cynthian body, and did her thoughts running on change imply. For maids take more delight when they prepare, and think of wives' states, than when wives they are. Beneath all these she wrought a fisherman, drawing his nets from forth the ocean, who drew so hard, ye might discover well the toughened sinews in his neck did swell. His inward strains drave out his bloodshot eyes, and springs of sweat did in his forehead rise. Yet was of naught but of a serpent sped, that in his bosom flew and stung him dead. And this by fate into her mind was sent, not wrought by mere instinct of her intent. At the scarf's other end her hand did frame, near the forked point of the divided flame, a country virgin keeping of a vine, who did of hollow bulrushes combine snares for the stubble-loving grasshopper, and by her lay her scrip that nourished her. Within a myrtle shade she sate and sung, and tufts of waving reeds about her sprung, where lurked 2 foxes, that while she applied her trifling snares, their thieveries did divide, one to the vine, another to her scrip, that she did negligently overslip, by which her fruitful vine and wholesome fare she suffered spoiled, to make a childish snare. These ominous fancies did her soul express, and every finger made a prophetess, to show what death was hid in love's disguise, and make her judgment conquer destinies. O what sweet forms fair ladies' souls do shroud, where they made seen and forced through their blood, if through their beauties, like rich work through lawn, they would set forth their minds with virtues drawn, in letting graces from their fingers fly, to still their eous thoughts with industry, that their plied wits in numbered silks might sing Passion's huge conquest, and their needles leading affection prisoner through their own built cities, pinioned with stories and Arachnean ditties. Proceed we now with Hero's sacrifice. She odours burned, and from their smoke did rise unsavoury fumes, that air with plagues inspired, and then the consecrated sticks she fired, on whose pale frame an angry spirit flew, and beat it down still as it upward grew. The virgin tapers that on the altar stood, when she enflamed them, burned as red as blood, all sad ostents of that too near success, that made such moving beauties motionless. Then Hero wept, but her affrighted eyes she quickly wrested from the sacrifice, shut them, and inwards for Leander looked, searched her soft bosom, and from thence she plucked his lovely picture, which when she had viewed, her beauties were with all love's joys renewed, the odours sweetened, and the fires burned clear, Leander's form left no ill object there. Such was his beauty, that the force of light, whose knowledge teacheth wonders infinite, the strength of number and proportion, nature had placed in it to make it known. Art was her daughter, and what human wits for study lost, entombed in drossy spirits. After this accident, which for her glory Hero could not but make a history, the inhabitants of Sestos and Abydos did every year, with feasts propitious, to fair Leander's picture sacrifice, and they were persons of special price that were allowed it, as an ornament to enrich their houses, for the continent of the strange virtues all approved it held. For even the very look of it repelled all blastings, witchcrafts, and the strifes of nature in those diseases that no herbs could cure. The wolfy sting of avarice it would pull, and make the rankest miser bountiful. It killed the fear of thunder and of death. The discords that conceit engendereth twixt man and wife, it for the time would cease. The flames of love it quenched, and would increase. Held in a prince's hand, it would put out the dreadfullest comet. It would ease all doubt of threatened mischiefs. It would bring a sleep such as were mad. It would enforce to weep most barbarous eyes. And many more effects this picture wrought, and sprung Leandrian sects. Of which was Hero first, for he whose form, held in her hand, cleared such a fatal storm, from hell she thought his person would defend her, which night and Hellespont would quickly send her. With this confirmed, she vowed to banish quite all thought of any check to her delight, and in contempt of silly bashfulness, she would the faith of her desires profess, where her religion should be policy, to follow love with zeal her piety. Her chamber her cathedral church should be, and her Leander her chief deity. For in her love these did the gods forego. And though her knowledge did not teach her so, yet did it teach her this, that what her heart did greatest hold in herself greatest part, that did she make her God. And 'twas less naught to leave gods in profession and in thought, than in her love and life. For therein lies most of her duties and their dignities. And rail the brain-bald world at what it will, that's the grand atheism that reigns in it still. Yet singularity she would use no more, for she was singular too much before. But she would please the world with fair pretext, love would not leave her conscience perplexed. Great men that will have less do for them, still must bear them out, though the acts be ne'er so ill. Meanness must pander be to excellence, pleasure atones falsehood and conscience. Dissembling was the worst, thought Hero then, and that was best, now she must live with men. O virtuous love, that taught her to do best when she did worst, and when she thought it least! Thus would she still proceed in works divine, and in her sacred state of priesthood shine, handling the holy rites with hands as bold, as if therein she did Jove's thunder hold, and need not fear those menaces of error, which she at others threw with greatest terror. O lovely Hero, nothing is thy sin, weighed with those foul faults other priests are in, that having neither faiths, nor works, nor beauties, to engender any excuse for slubbered duties, with as much countenance fill their holy chairs, and sweat denouncements gainst profane affairs, as if their lives were cut out by their places, and they the only fathers of the graces. End of Section 8. Recording by Martin Geeson in Haslemere, Surrey. Section 9 of Hero and Leander. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Martin Geeson. Hero and Leander by Christopher Marlowe and George Chapman. Section 9. Now, as with settled mind she did repair her thoughts, to sacrifice her ravish'd hair and her torn robe, which on the altar lay, and only for religion's fire did stay, she heard a thunder by the Cyclops beaten, in such a volley as the world did threaten, given Venus, as she parted the airy sphere, descending now to chide with Hero here. When suddenly the goddess waggoners, the swans and turtles, that in couplet fears, through all worlds' bosoms draw her influence, lighted in Hero's window, and from thence to her fair shoulders flew the gentle doves. Graceful Aidone, that sweet pleasure loves, and rough-foot Cheste with the tufted crown, both which did kiss her, though their goddess frown. The swans did in the solid flood her glass proin their fair plumes, of which the fairest was Jove-lov'd Leucote, that pure brightness is, the other bounty-loving Dapsilis. All were in heaven, now they with Hero were. But Venus' looks brought wrath, and urged fear. Her robe was scarlet, black her head's attire, and through her naked breast shined streams of fire, as when the rarefied air is driven in flashing streams, and opes the darkened heaven. In her white hand a wreath of yew she bore, and breaking the icy wreath sweet Hero wore, she forced about her brows her wreath of yew, and said, "Now, minion, to thy fate be true, though not to me. Endure what this portends. Begin where lightness will, in shame it ends. Love makes thee cunning. Thou art current now by being counterfeit. Thy broken vow Deceit with her pied garters must rejoin, and with her stamp thou countenances must coin. Coyness and pure deceit for purities, and still a maid wilt seem in cozened eyes, and have an antic face to laugh within, while thy smooth looks make men digest thy sin. But since thy lips, least thought forsworn, forswore, be never virgin's vow worth trusting more. When beauty's dearest did her goddess here breathe such rebukes, 'gainst that she could not clear, dumb sorrow spake aloud in tears and blood, that from her grief-burst veins, in piteous flood, from the sweet conduits of her favour fell. The gentle turtles did with moans make swell their shining gorges, the white black-eyed swans did sing as woeful epicedians, as they would straightways die. When pity's queen, the goddess Ecte, that had ever been hid in a watery cloud near Hero's cries, since the first instant of her broken eyes, gave bright Leucote voice, and made her speak, to ease her anguish, whose swollen breast did break with anger at her goddess, that did touch Hero so near, for that she used so much. And thrusting her white neck at Venus, said, "Why may not amorous Hero seem a maid, though she be none, as well as you suppress in modest cheeks your inward wantonness? How often have we drawn you from above, to exchange with mortals rights for rights in love? Why in your priest then call you that offence, that shines in you, and is your influence?" With this the Furies stopped Leucote's lips, enjoined by Venus, who with rosy whips beat the kind bird. Fierce lightning from her eyes did set on fire fair Hero's sacrifice, which was her torn robe and enforced hair. And the bright flame became a maid most fair for her aspect. Her tresses were of wire, knit like a net, where hearts set all on fire struggled in pants, and could not get released. Her arms were all with golden pincers dressed, and 20 fashioned knots, pulleys, and brakes, and all her body girt with painted snakes. Her down parts in a scorpion's tail combined, freckled with 20 colours. Pied wings shined out of her shoulders. Cloth had never dye, nor sweeter colours never viewed eye in scorching Turkey, Caries, Tartary, than shined about this spirit notorious. Nor was Arachne's web so glorious. Of lightning and of shreds she was begot, more hold in base dissemblers is there not. Her name was Eronusis. Venus flew from Hero's sight, and at her chariot drew this wondrous creature to so steep a height, that all the world she might command with sleight of her gay wings. And then she bade her haste, since Hero had dissembled and disgraced her rights so much, and every breast infect with her deceits. She made her architect of all dissimulation, and since then never was any trust in maids or men. Oh, it spited fair Venus' heart to see her most delighted, and one she choosed, for temper of her mind, to be the only ruler of her kind, so soon to let her virgin race be ended. Not solely for the fault a wit offended, but that in strife for chasteness with the moon, spiteful Diana bade her show but one that was her servant vowed, and lived a maid. And now she thought to answer that upbraid, Hero had lost her answer. Who knows not Venus would seem as far from any spot of light demeanour as the very skin twixt Cynthia's brows. Sin is ashamed of sin. Up Venus flew, and scarce durst up for fear of Phoebe's laughter, when she passed her sphere. And so most ugly clouded was the light. That day was hid in day, night came ere night. And Venus could not through the thick air pierce, till the day's king, god of undaunted verse, because she was so plentiful a theme to such as wore his laurel anademe, like to a fiery bullet made descent, and from her passage those fat vapours rent, that being not thoroughly rarefied to rain, melted like pitch, as blue as any vein. And scalding tempests made the earth to shrink under their fervour, and the world did think in every drop a torturing spirit flew, it pierced so deeply, and it burned so blue. Betwixt all this and Hero, Hero held Leander's picture as a Persian shield, and she was free from fear of worst success. The more ill threats us, we suspect the less. As we grow hapless, violence subtle grows, dumb, deaf, and blind, and comes when no man knows. End of section 9. Recording by Martin Geeson in Haslemere, Surrey. Section 10 of Hero and Leander. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Martin Geeson. Hero and Leander by Christopher Marlowe and George Chapman. Section 10. The Fifth Sestiad by George Chapman. Part 1. The Argument. Day doubles her accustomed date, as loath the night, incensed by fate, should wreck our lovers. Hero's plight longs for Leander and the night, which, ere her thirsty wish recovers, she sends for two betrothed lovers, and marries them, that with their crew their sports and ceremonies due she covertly might celebrate with secret joy her own estate. She makes a feast, at which appears the wild nymph Terras, that still bears an ivory lute, tells ominous tales, and sings at solemn festivals. Now was bright Hero weary of the day, thought an Olympiad in Leander's stay. Sol and the soft foot Hours hung on his arms, and would not let him swim, foreseeing his harms. That day Aurora double grace obtained of her love Phoebus. She his horses reined, set on his golden knee, and as she list, she pulled him back, and as she pulled, she kissed, to have him turn to bed. He loved her more to see the love Leander Hero bore. Examples profit much, 10 times in one, in persons full of note, good deeds are done. Day was so long, men walking fell asleep. The heavy humours that their eyes did steep made them fear mischiefs. the hard streets were beds for covetous churls and for ambitious heads, that, spite of nature, would their business ply. All thought they had the falling epilepsy, men grovelled so upon the smothered ground, and pity did the heart of heaven confound. The gods, the graces, and the muses came down to the destinies, to stay the frame of the true lovers' deaths, and all world's tears. But death before had stopped their cruel ears. All the celestials parted mourning then, pierced with our human miseries more than men. Ah, nothing doth the world with mischief fill, but want of feeling one another's ill. With their descent the day grew something fair, and cast a brighter robe upon the air. Hero, to shorten time with merriment, for young Alcmane and bright Maia sent, two lovers that had long craved marriage dues at Hero's hands, but she did still refuse. For lovely Maia was her consort vowed in her maid state, and therefore not allowed to amorous nuptials. Yet fair Hero now intended to dispense with her cold vow, since hers was broken, and to marry her. The rites would pleasing matter minister to her conceits, and shorten tedious day. They came. Sweet music ushered the odorous way, and wanton air in 20 sweet forms danced after her fingers. Beauty and love advanced their ensigns in the downless rosy faces of youths and maids, led after by the Graces. For all these Hero made a friendly feast, welcomed them kindly, did much love protest, winning their hearts with all the means she might, that when her fault should chance to abide the light, their loves might cover or extenuate it, and high in her worst fate make pity sit. She married them, and in the banquet came, borne by the virgins. Hero strived to frame her thoughts to mirth. Ay me, but hard it is to imitate a false and forced bliss. Ill may a sad mind forge a merry face, nor hath constrained laughter any grace. Then laid she wines on cares to make them sink. Who fears the threats of fortune, let him drink. To these quick nuptials entered suddenly admired Terras with the ebon thigh, a nymph that haunted the green Sestian groves, and would consort soft virgins in their loves, at gaysome triumphs and on solemn days, singing prophetic elegies and lays, and fingering of a silver lute she tied with black and purple scarfs by her left side. Apollo gave it, and her skill withal, and she was termed his dwarf, she was so small, yet great in virtue, for his beams enclosed his virtues in her. Never was proposed riddle to her, or augury, strange or new, but she resolved it. Never slight tale flew from her charmed lips without important sense, shown in some grave succeeding consequence. This little sylvan, with her songs and tales, gave such estate to feasts and nuptials, that though oft times she forewent tragedies, yet for her strangeness still she pleased their eyes, and for her smallness they admired her so, they thought her perfect born, and could not grow. All eyes were on her. Hero did command an altar decked with sacred state should stand at the feast's upper end, close by the bride, on which the pretty nymph might sit espied. Then all were silent. Every one so hears, as all their senses climbed into their ears. And first this amorous tale, that fitted well fair Hero and the nuptials, she did tell. The tale of Terras. Hymen, that now is god of nuptial rites, and crowns with honour love and his delights, of Athens was a youth, so sweet of face, that many thought him of the female race. Such quickening brightness did his clear eyes dart, warm went their beams to his beholder's heart. In such pure leagues his beauties were combined, that there your nuptial contracts first were signed. For as proportion, white and crimson meet in beauty's mixture, all right clear and sweet, the eye responsible, the golden hair, and none is held without the other fair. All spring together, all together fade. Such intermixed affections should invade two perfect lovers, which being yet unseen, their virtues and their comforts copied been in beauty's concord, subject to the eye, and that in Hymen pleased so matchlessly, that lovers were esteemed in their full grace, like form and colour mixed in Hymen's face. And such sweet concord was thought worthy then of torches, music, feasts, and greatest men. So Hymen looked, that even the chastest mind he moved to join in joys of sacred kind. For only now his chins first down consorted his head's rich fleece, in golden curls contorted. And as he was so loved, he loved so too. So should best beauties, bound by nuptials, do. End of section 10. Recording by Martin Geeson in Haslemere, Surrey. Section 11 of Hero and Leander. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Martin Geeson. Hero and Leander by Christopher Marlowe and George Chapman. Section 11. The fifth Sestiad, Part 2. The tale of Terras continued. Bright Eucharis, who was by all men said the noblest, fairest, and the richest maid of all the Athenian damsels, Hymen loved with such transmission, that his heart removed from his white breast to hers. But her estate, in passing his, was so interminate for wealth and honour, that his love durst feed on naught but sight and hearing, nor could breed hope of requital, the grand prize of love. Nor could he hear or see, but he must prove how his rare beauty's music would agree with maids in consort, Therefore robbed he his chin of those same few first fruits it bore, and clad in such attire as virgins wore, he kept them company, and might right well, for he did all but Lucrece excel in all the fair of beauty. Yet he wanted virtue to make his own desires implanted in his dear Lucrece, for women never love beauty in their sex, but envy ever. His judgment yet, that durst not suit a dress, nor past due means presume of due success, reason gat fortune in the end to speed to his best prayers. But strange it seemed indeed that fortune should a chaste affection bless. Preferment seldom graceth bashfulness, nor graced it Hymen yet. But many a dart and many an amorous thought enthrilled his heart ere he obtained her. And he sick became, forced to abstain her sight. And then the flame raged in his bosom. Oh, what grief did fill him! Sight made him sick, and want of sight did kill him. The virgins wondered where Diaetia stayed, for so did Hymen term himself a maid. At length with sickly looks he greeted them. 'Tis strange to see 'gainst what an extreme stream a lover strives. Poor Hymen looked so ill, that as in merit he increased still, by suffering much, so he in grace decreased. Women are most won when men merit least. If merit look not well, love bids stand by. Love's special lesson is to please the eye. And Hymen, soon recovering all he lost, deceiving still these maids, but himself most, his love and he, with many virgin dames, noble by birth, noble by beauty's flames, leaving the town with songs and hallowed lights, to do great Ceres Eleusina rites of zealous sacrifice, were made a prey to barbarous rovers, that in ambush lay, and with rude hands enforced their shining spoil, far from the darkened city, tired with toil. And when the yellow issue of the sky came trooping forth, jealous of cruelty to their bright fellows of this under heaven, into a double night they saw them driven, a horrid cave, the thieves' black mansion, where, weary of the journey they had gone, their last night's watch, and drunk with their sweet gains, dull Morpheus entered, laden with silken chains, stronger than iron, and bound the swelling veins and tired senses of these lawless swains. But when the virgin lights thus dimly burned, oh, what a hell was heaven in! How they mourned and wrung their hands, and wound their gentle forms into the shapes of sorrow! Golden storms fell from their eyes. As when sun appears and yet it rains, so showed their eyes their tears. And as when funeral dames watch a dead corse weeping about it, telling with remorse what pains he felt, how long in pain he lay, how little food he ate, what he would say, and then mix mournful tales of others' deaths, smothering themselves in clouds of their own breaths, At length one cheering other call for wine. The golden bowl drinks tears out of their eyne, as they drink wine from it, and round it goes, each helping other to relieve their woes. So cast these virgins' beauties mutual rays, one lights another, face the face displays, lips by reflection kissed, and hands shook, even by the whiteness each of other took. But Hymen now used friendly Morpheus' aid, slew every thief, and rescued every maid. And now did his enamour'd passion take heart from his hearty deed, whose worth did make his hope of bounteous Eucharis more strong. And now came love with Proteus, who had long juggled the little god with prayers and gifts, ran through all shapes, and varied all his shifts, to win love's stay with him, and make him love him. And when he saw no strength of sleight could move him to make him love or stay, he nimbly turned into love's self, he so extremely burned. And thus came love, with Proteus and his power, to encounter Eucharis. First, like the flower that Juno's milk did spring, the silver lily, he fell on Hymen's hand, who straight did spy the bounteous Godhead, and with wondrous joy offered it Eucharis. She, wondrous coy, drew back her hand. The subtle flower did woo it, and drawing it near, mixed so you could not know it. As two clear tapers mix in one their light, so did the lily and the hand their white. She viewed it, and her view the form bestows among her spirits, for as colour flows from superficies of each thing we see, even so with colours forms emitted be. And where love's form is, love is. Love is form. He entered at the eye, his sacred storm rose from the hand, love's sweetest instrument. It stirred her blood's sea so that high it went, and beat in bashful waves 'gainst the white shore of her divided cheeks. It raged the more, because the tide went 'gainst the haughty wind of her estate and birth. And as we find in fainting ebbs, the flowery zephyr hurls the green-haired Hellespont, broke in silver curls, 'gainst Hero's tower, but in his blast's retreat, the waves obeying him, they after beat, leaving the chalky shore a great way pale, then moist it freshly with another gale. So ebbed and flowed in Eucharis' face, coyness and love strived which had greatest grace. Virginity did fight on coyness' side, fear of her parents' frowns, and female pride loathing the lower place more than it loves the high contents desert and virtue moves. With love fought Hymen's beauty and his valour, which scarce could so much favour, yet allure to come to strike, but fameless, idle stood. Action is fiery valour's sovereign good. But love, once entered, wished no greater aid than he could find within. Thought betrayed, the bribed but incorrupted garrison sung "Your Hymen." There those songs begun, and love was grown so rich with such a gain, and wanton with the ease of his free reign, that he would turn into her roughest frowns to turn them out, and thus he Hymen crowns, king of his thoughts, man's greatest empery. This was his first brave step to deity. Home to the mourning city they repair, with news as wholesome as the morning air, to the sad parents of each saved maid. But Hymen and his Eucharis had laid this plot, to make the flame of their delight round as the moon at full, and full as bright. End of section 11. Recording by Martin Geeson in Haslemere, Surrey. Section 12 of Hero and Leander. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Martin Geeson. Hero and Leander by Christopher Marlowe and George Chapman. Section 12. The Fifth Sestiad, Part 3. The Tale of Terras, continued. Because the parents of chaste Eucharis, exceeding Hymen's so, might cross their bliss, and as the world rewards deserts, that law cannot assist with force, so when they saw their daughters safe, take vantage of their own, praise Hymen's valour much, nothing bestown. Hymen must leave the virgins in a grove far off from Athens, and go first to prove, if to restore them all with fame and life, he should enjoy his dearest as his wife. This told to all the maids, the most agree. The riper sort, knowing what 'tis to be the first month of a news so far derived, and that to hear and bear news brave folks lived, as being a carriage special hard to bear occurrence, these occurrence being so dear, they did with grace protest. They were content to accost their friends with all their compliment, for Hymen's good, but to incur their harm, there he must pardon them. This wit went warm to Adolesce's brain, a nymph born high, made all of voice and fire that upwards fly. Her heart and all her forces nether train climbed to her tongue, and thither fell her brain, since it could go no higher, and it must go. All power she had, even her tongue did so. In spirit and quickness she much joy did take, and loved her tongue only for quickness' sake. And she would haste and tell, the rest all stay. Hymen goes one, the nymph another way, and what became of her I'll tell at last. Yet take her visage now, moist-lipped, long-faced, thin like an iron wedge, so sharp and tart, as 'twere of purpose made to cleave love's heart. Well were this lovely beauty rid of her. And Hymen did at Athens now prefer his welcome suit, which he with joy aspired. 100 princely youths with him retired to fetch the nymphs. Chariots and music went, and home they came, heaven with applauses rent. The nuptials straight proceed, whilst all the town, fresh in their joys, might do the most renown. First, gold-locked Hymen did to church repair, like a quick offering burned in flames of hair. And after, with a virgin firmament, the Godhead proving bride attended went before them all. She looked in her command, as if form-giving Cypria's silver hand gripped all their beauties, and crushed out one flame. She blushed to see how beauty overcame the thoughts of all men. Next, before her went 5 lovely children, decked with ornament of her sweet colours, bearing torches by. For light was held a happy augury of generation, whose efficient right is nothing else but to produce to light. The odd disparent number they did choose, to show the union married loves should use, since in 2 equal parts it will not sever, but the midst holds one to rejoin it ever, as common to both parts. Men therefore deem that equal number gods do not esteem, being authors of sweet peace and unity, but pleasing to the infernal empery, under whose ensigns wars and discords fight, since an even number you may disunite in 2 parts equal, naught in middle left to reunite each part from other reft. And 5 they hold in most especial prize, since 'tis the first odd number that doth rise from the 2 foremost numbers' unity, that odd and even are, which are 2 and 3. For 1 no number is, but thence doth flow the powerful race of number. Next did go a noble matron, that did spinning bear a hussif's rock and spindle, and did wear a wether's skin, with all the snowy fleece, to intimate that even the daintiest piece and noblest born dame should industrious be. That which does good disgraceth no degree. End of section 12. Recording by Martin Geeson in Haslemere, Surrey. Section 13 of Hero and Leander. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Martin Geeson. Hero and Leander by Christopher Marlowe and George Chapman. Section 13. The 5th Sestiad, Part 4. The tale of Terras concluded. And now to Juno's temple they are come, where her grave priest stood in the marriage room. On his right arm did hang a scarlet veil, and from his shoulders to the ground did trail on either side ribands of white and blue. With the red veil he hid the bashful hue of the chaste bride, to show the modest shame in coupling with a man should grace a dame. Then took he the disparent silks, and tied the lovers by the waists, and side by side, in token that hereafter they must bind in one self-sacred knot each other's mind. Before them on an altar he presented both fire and water, which was first invented. Since to ingenerate every human creature, and every other birth produced by nature, moisture and heat must mix, so man and wife for human race must join in nuptial life. Then one of Juno's birds, the painted jay, he sacrificed, and took the gall away, all which he did behind the altar throw, in sign no bitterness of hate should grow 'twixt married loves, nor any least disdain. Nothing they spake, for 'twas esteemed too plain for the most silken mildness of a maid to let a public audience hear it said she boldly took the man. And so respected was bashfulness in Athens, it erected to chaste Agnaea, which is shamefacedness, a sacred temple, holding her a goddess. And now to feasts, masques, and triumphant shows the shining troops returned, even till earth throes brought forth with joy the thickest part of night, when the sweet nuptial song that used to cite all to their rest was by Phaemonoe sung, first Delphian prophetess, whose graces sprung out of the Muses' well. She sung before the bride into her chamber, at which door a matron and a torch-bearer did stand. A painted box of comfits in her hand the matron held, and so did other some that compassed round the honoured nuptial room. The custom was that every maid did wear during her maidenhead a silken sphere about her waist, above her inmost weed, knit with Minerva's knot, and that was freed by the fair bridegroom on the marriage night, with many ceremonies of delight. And yet eternized Hymen's tender bride, to suffer it dissolved so, sweetly cried. The maids that heard so loved and did adore her, they wished with all their hearts to suffer for her. So had the matrons that with comfits stood about the chamber such affectionate blood, and so true feeling of her harmless pains, that every one a shower of comfits rains. For which the bride youths scrambling on the ground, in noise of that sweet hail her cries were drowned. And thus blessed Hymen joyed his gracious bride, and for his joy was after deified. The saffron mirror by which Phoebus' love green Tellus decks her, now he held above the cloudy mountains, and the noble maid, sharp-visaged Adolesce, that was strayed out of her way in hasting with her news, not till this hour the Athenian turrets views. And now brought home by guides, she heard by all that her long-kept occurrence would be stale, and how fair Hymen's honours did excel for those rare news which she came short to tell. To hear her dear tongue robbed of such a joy, made the well-spoken nymph take such a toy, that down she sunk, when lightning from above shrunk her lean body, and for mere free love turned her into the pied-plumed Psittacus, that now the parrot is surnamed by us. who still with counterfeit confusion prates naught but news common to the commonst mates. This told, strange Terras touched her lute, and sung this ditty, that the torchy evening sprung. Epithalamion terratos. Come, come, dear night, love's mart of kisses, sweet close of his ambitious line, the fruitful summer of his blisses, love's glory doth in darkness shine. O come, soft rest of cares, come, night. Come, naked virtues only tire the reaped harvest of the light, bound up in sheaves of sacred fire. Love calls to war, sighs his alarms, lips his swords are, the field his arms. Come, night, and lay thy velvet hand on glorious day's outfacing face, and all thy crowned flames command for torches to our nuptial grace. Love calls to war, sighs his alarms, lips his swords are, the field his arms. No need have we of factious day, to cast in envy of thy peace her balls of discord in thy way. Here beauty's day doth never cease. Day is abstracted here, and varied in a triple sphere. Hero, Alcmane, Maya, so outshine thee. Ere thou come here, let Thetis thrice refine thee. Love calls to war, sighs his alarms, lips his swords are, the field his arms. The evening star I see. Rise, youths, the evening star helps love to summon war. Both now embracing be. Rise, youths, love's right claims more than banquets. Rise. Now the bright marigolds that deck the skies, Phoebus' celestial flowers, that contrary to his flowers here, ope when he shuts his eye, and shut when he doth open, crown your sports. Now love in night, and night in love exhorts courtship and dances, all your parts employ, and suit night's rich expansure with your joy. Love paints his longings in sweet virgins' eyes. Rise, youths, love's right claims more than banquets. Rise. Rise, virgins, let fair nuptial loves enfold your fruitless breasts. The maidenheads ye hold are not your own alone, but parted are. Part in disposing them your parents share, and that a third part is, so must ye save your loves a third, and you your thirds must have. Love paints his longings in sweet virgins' eyes. Rise, youths, love's rights claim more than banquets. Rise. Herewith the amorous spirit, that was so kind to Terras' hair, and combed it down with wind, still as it comet-like brake from her brain, would needs have Terras gone, and did refrain to blow it down, which staring up dismayed the timorous feast, and she no longer stayed, but bowing to the bridegroom and the bride, did like a shooting exhalation glide out of their sights. The turning of her back made them all shriek, it looked so ghastly black. O hapless hero, that most hapless cloud thy soon succeeding tragedy foreshowed! Thus all the nuptial crew to joys depart, but much wrung hero stood hell's blackest dart, whose wound, because I grieve so to display, I use digressions thus to increase the day. End of section 13. Recording by Martin Geeson in Haslemere, Surrey. Section 14 of Hero and Leander. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Martin Geeson. Hero and Leander by Christopher Marlowe and George Chapman. Section 14. The Sixth Sestiad by George Chapman. Part 1. The Argument. Leucote flies to all the winds, and from the fates their outrage blinds, that Hero and her love may meet. Leander, with love's complete fleet manned in himself, puts forth to seize, when straight the ruthless Destinies, with Ate, stirs the winds to war upon the Hellespont. Their jar drowns poor Leander. Hero's eyes, wet witnesses of his surprise, her torch blown out, grief casts her down upon her love, and both doth drown. In whose just ruth the god of seas transforms them to the Acanthides. No longer could the day nor destinies delay the night, who now did frowning rise into her throne, and at her humorous breasts visions and dreams lay sucking. All men's rests fell like the mists of death upon their eyes. Days' too long darts so killed their faculties. The winds yet, like the flowers, to cease began. For bright Leucote, Venus' whitest swan, that held sweet Hero dear, spread her fair wings, like to a field of snow, and message brings from Venus to the Fates, to entreat them lay their charge upon the winds, their rage to stay, that the stern battle of the seas might cease, and guard Leander to his love in peace. The Fates consent. Ay me, dissembling Fates! They showed their favours, to conceal their hates, and draw Leander on, lest seas too high should stay his too obsequious destiny. Who like a fleering slavish parasite, in warping profit or a traitorous sleight, hoops round his rotten body with devotes, and pricks his descant face full of false notes, praising with open throat, and oaths as foul as his false heart, the beauty of an owl, kissing his skipping hand with charmed skips, that cannot leave, but leaps upon his lips like a cock sparrow, or a shameless queen sharp at a red-lipped youth, and naught doth mean of all his antic shows, but doth repair more tender fawns, and takes a scattered hair from his tame subject's shoulder, whips and calls for everything he lacks, creeps against the walls with backward humbless, to give needless way. Thus his false fate did with Leander play. First to black Eurus flies the white Leucote, born mongst the negroes in the Levant sea, on whose curled heads the glowing sun doth rise, and shows the sovereign will of destinies to have him cease his blasts, and down he lies. Next to the fenny Notus course she holds, and found him leaning with his arms in folds upon a rock, his white hair full of showers, and him she chargeth by the fatal powers to hold in his wet cheeks his cloudy voice. To Zephyr then, that doth in flowers rejoice, to snake-foot Boreas next she did remove, and found him tossing of his ravish'd love, to heat his frosty bosom hid in snow, who with Leucote's sight did cease to blow. Thus all were still to Hero's heart's desire, who with all speed did consecrate a fire of flaming gums and comfortable spice to light her torch, which in such curious price she held, being object to Leander's sight, that naught but fires perfumed must give it light. She loved it so, she grieved to see it burn, since it would waste, and soon to ashes turn. Yet if it burned not, 'twere not worth her eyes, what made it nothing, gave it all the prize. Sweet torch, true glass of our society, what man does good, but he consumes thereby? But thou wert loved for good, held high, given show, poor virtue loathed for good, obscured, held low. Do good, be pined; be deedless good, disgraced. Unless we feed on men, we let them fast. Yet Hero with these thoughts her torch did spend. When bees make wax, nature doth not intend it should be made a torch, but we that know the proper virtue of it make it so, and when 'tis made we light it. Nor did nature propose one life to maids, but each such creature makes by her soul the best of her true state, which without love is rude, disconsolate, and wants love's fire to make it mild and bright, till when maids are but torches wanting light. Thus 'gainst our grief, not cause of grief, we fight. The right of naught is gleaned but the delight. Up went she, but to tell how she descended, would God she were not dead, or my verse ended. She was the rule of wishes, sum and end, for all the parts that did on love depend, yet cast the torch his brightness further forth. But what shines nearest best holds truest worth. Leander did not through such tempest swim to kiss the torch, although it lighted him. but all his powers in her desires awaked. Her love and virtues clothed him richly naked. Men kiss but fire that only shows pursue. Her torch and hero figure show and virtue. Now at opposed Abydos naught was heard but bleating flocks, and many a bellowing herd, slain for the nuptials, cracks of falling woods, blows of broad axes, pourings out of floods. The guilty Hellespont was mixed and stained with bloody torrent that the shambles reigned. Not arguments of feast, but shows that bled, foretelling that red night that followed. More blood was spilt, more honours were addressed, than could have graced any happy feast. Rich banquets, triumphs, every pomp employs his sumptuous hand. No miser's nuptial joys. Air felt continual thunder with the noise made in the general marriage violence, and no man knew the cause of this expense, but the two hapless lords, Leander's sire and poor Leander. Poorest where the fire of credulous love made him most rich surmised. As short was he of that himself so prized, as is an empty gallant full of form, that thinks each look an act, each drop a storm, that falls from his brave breathings, most brought up in our metropolis, and hath his cup brought after him to feasts, and much palm bears for his rare judgment in the attire he wears. Hath seen the hot Low Countries, not their heat, observe their rampires and their buildings yet, and for your sweet discourse with mouths, is heard giving instructions with his very beard. Hath gone with an ambassador, and been a great man's mate in travelling, even to Rheims, and then puts all his worth in such a face as he saw brave men make, and strives for grace to get his news forth, as when you descry a ship with all her sail contends to fly out of the narrow Thames with winds unapt, now crosseth here, then there, then his way rapt, and then hath one point reached, then alters all, and to another crooked reach doth fall of half a bird bolt's shoot, keeping more coil than if she danced upon the ocean's toil. So serious is his trifling company, in all his swelling ship of vacantry, and so short of himself in his high thought was our Leander in his fortunes brought, and in his fort of love that he thought won. But otherwise he scorns comparison. O sweet Leander, thy large worth I hide in a short grave. Ill-favour'd storms must chide thy sacred favour. I in floods of ink must drown thy graces, which white papers drink, even as thy beauties did the foul black seas. I must describe the hell of thy decease, that heaven did merit. Yet I needs must see our painted fools and cock-horse peasantry still still usurp with long lives, loves, and lust the seats of virtue, cutting short as dust her dear bought issue. Ill to worse converts, and tramples in the blood of all deserts. End of section 14. Recording by Martin Geeson in Haslemere, Surrey. Section 15 of Hero and Leander. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Martin Geeson. Hero and Leander by Christopher Marlowe and George Chapman. Section 15. The Sixth Sestiad, Part 2. Night, close and silent, now goes fast before the captains and the soldiers to the shore, on whom attended the appointed fleet at Sestos Bay, that should Leander meet, who feigned he in another ship would pass. Which must not be, for no one mean there was to get his love home, but the course he took. Forth did his beauty for his beauty look, and saw her through her torch, as you behold sometimes within the sun a face of gold, formed in strong thoughts by that tradition's force that says a god sits there and guides his course. His sister was with him, to whom he showed his guide by sea, and said, "Oft have you viewed in one heaven many stars, but never yet in one star many heavens till now were met. See, lovely sister, see now Hero shines, no heaven but her appears. Each star repines, and all are clad in clouds, as if they mourned to be by influence of earth outburned. Yet doth she shine, and teacheth virtue's train still to be constant in hell's blackest reign, though even the gods themselves do so entreat them as they did hate, and earth as she would eat them." Off went his silken robe, and in he leapt, whom the kind waves so liquorously clept, thickening for haste one in another so, to kiss his skin, that he might almost go to Hero's tower, had that kind minute lasted. But now the cruel fates with Ate hasted to all the winds, and made them battle fight upon the Hellespont, for either's right pretended to the windy monarchy. And forth they brake, the seas mixed with the sky, and tossed distressed Leander, being in hell as high as heaven. Bliss not in height doth dwell. The Destinies sate dancing on the waves, to see the glorious winds with mutual braves consume each other. O true glass, to see how ruinous ambitious statists be to their own glories! Poor Leander cried for help to sea-born Venus, she denied. To Boreas, that for his Atea's sake he would some pity on his hero take, and for his own love's sake on his desires. But glory never blows cold pity's fires. Then call'd he Neptune, who through all the noise Knew with affright his wreck'd Leander's voice, and up he rose. For haste his forehead hit 'gainst heaven's hard crystal, his proud waves he smit with his forked sceptre, that could not obey. Much greater powers than Neptune's gave them sway. They lov'd Leander so, in groans they brake when they came near him, and such space did take 'twixt one another, loath to issue on, that in their shallow furrows earth was shown, and the poor lover took a little breath. But the cursed fates sate spinning of his death on every wave, and with the servile winds tumbled them on him. And now Hero finds, by that she felt, her dear Leander's state. She wept, and prayed for him to every fate, and every wind that whipped her with her hair about the face, she kissed and spake it fair, kneeled to it, gave it drink out of her eyes to quench his thirst. But still their cruelties even her poor torch envied, and rudely beat the bating flame from that dear food it ate. Dear, for it nourish'd her Leander's life, which with her robe she rescued from their strife. But silk too soft was, such hard hearts to break, and she, dear soul, even as her silk, faint, weak, could not preserve it. Out, oh out it went. Leander still call'd Neptune, that now rent his brackish curls, and tore his wrinkled face, where tears in billows did each other chase, and burst with ruth he hurl'd his marble mace at the stern Fates. It wounded Lachesis that drew Leander's thread, and could not miss the thread itself, as it her hand did hit, but smote it full, and quite did sunder it. The more kind Neptune raged, the more he raised his love's life fought, and killed as he embraced. Anger doth still his own mishap increase. If any comfort live, it is in peace. O thievish fates, to let blood, flesh, and sense build two fair temples for their excellence, to rob it with a poisoned influence. Though soul's gifts starve, the bodies are held dear in ugliest things. Sense sport preserves a bear, but here naught serves our turns. O heaven and earth, how most wretched is our human birth! And now did all the tyrannous crew depart, knowing there was a storm in Hero's heart, greater than they could make, and scorned their smart. She bowed herself so low out of her tower, that wonder 'twas she fell not ere her hour, with searching the lamenting waves for him. Like a poor snail, her gentle supple limb hung on her turret's top, so most downright, as she would dive beneath the darkness quite, to find her jewel. Jewel, her Leander, A name of all earth's jewels pleased not her like his dear name. Leander, still my choice, come naught but my Leander. O my voice, turn to Leander, henceforth be all sounds, accents, and phrases that show all grief's wounds analysed in Leander. O black change! Trumpets, do you, with thunder of your clang, drive out this change's horror? My voice faints. Where all joy was, now shriek out all complaints. Thus cried she, for her mixed soul could tell her love was dead. And when the morning fell prostrate upon the weeping earth for woe, blushes that bled out of her cheeks did show Leander brought by Neptune, bruised and torn with cities' ruins he to rocks had worn, to filthy usuring rocks that would have blood, though they could get of him no other good. She saw him, and the sight was much, much more than might have served to kill her. Should her store of giant sorrows speak? Burst, die, bleed, and leave poor plaints to us that shall succeed. She fell on her love's bosom, hugged it fast, and with Leander's name she breathed her last. Neptune for pity in his arms did take them, flung them into the air, and did awake them like two sweet birds, surnamed the Acanthides, which we call thistle-warps, that near no seas dare ever come, but still in couples fly, and feed on thistle-tops, to testify the hardness of their first life in their last. The first in thorns of love that sorrows past, and so most beautiful their colours show, as none, so little, like them. Her sad brow a sable velvet feather covers quite, even like the forehead cloth that in the night, or when they sorrow, ladies use to wear. Their wings, blue, red, and yellow mixed appear, colours that, as we construe colours, paint their states to life. The yellow shows their saint, the dainty Venus, left them; blue their truth; the red and black, ensigns of death and ruth. And this true honour from their love-death sprung. They were the first that ever poet sung. End of section 15. Recording by Martin Geeson in Haslemere, Surrey. End of Hero and Leander by Christopher Marlowe and George Chapman.